Hi, and welcome to Answers News for November 16th, 2017. And so Roger is again here with me today, and Bodie will be back Monday, but you'll be gone.
I'll be gone.
So I'm always here. So, just keep switching off people. And so if you are on Facebook, remember on Ken Ham's Facebook page, so go there and you can start sending those emojis across. We try to give a little bit of time for people to come on, get those notifications, and see that my daughter's watching, so that's good. I can see that. So anyways, we thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking, because obviously Christmas is right around the corner. As soon as Thanksgiving's over, or even before it's over, everyone starts this mad frenzy, seems like, of shopping. And so we wanted to just talk a little bit about what we do sort of here at Christmas time, and some possible even Christmas gift options that you might want to think about. So this year, for the first time, we will have Christmas time at the Ark. And so there will be a lot of lights. Obviously, we light the Ark itself up. I was out there just a couple weeks ago, and it is very beautiful, because there's not a lot of light pollution around that area. And so it really shines bright in the darkness. And it is free, so you don't have to pay except for parking to be able to go to that. The vendors will be open. So there's food. There's a lot of fair trade sales going on, or you can buy things made by people in other countries to help support their livelihood. And we're also having this very cool laser projection show.
I'm really excited about this. And we've been able to see some of the rough animations as they begin getting the show developed, and it's just going to be awesome, a great way to showcase what the Ark's true message is about. It's really about salvation and pointing to Christ, as you can see the cross highlighted on the door there.
Yeah, so it basically, the Ark becomes a giant screen in which we show kind of creation to the cross. And so that'll be a really neat presentation. It's three times a night. And then we're doing Christmas Town here at the Creation Museum, which again will have some live actors, so to speak, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, we have wise men, and so all of those kinds of things going on here. Again, tremendous lights, shows, shopping, lots of great things, and it's free. So what I like about these is that they're free. It's one of my favorite things, because Christmas can get really expensive when you try to go to a lot of these things, and so I'm really glad that we can offer that for free. And then you brought some products that you thought people might be interested in.
Yeah, we have a lot of products, things geared specifically for Christmas. There's a whole set of greeting cards that have more than just a cardinal and a snowflake on them, but the real message of Christ, and some very intriguing patterns that our own designers have made. We've got great talented people. Things like Christmas ornaments and calendars and foam puzzles and lots of books. Somehow I wound up with an Ark theme today, but books about the Ark Encounter. So if you've been to the Ark Encounter and you want to kind of share that experience with somebody in your family, there are books like this. And here's a children's book that will help you talk through those things with kids or grandkids. So lots of great resources, Buddy Davis DVDs for the kids, or CDs that would just be great to share with family and connect over those things.
We even have some really cool umbrellas that I like. They have an umbrella that it looks like it has like white raindrops all over it, but when rain hits it, it changes colors. And so it's really a cool, I don't know, I like that kind of stuff.
It's a great gift idea. So you can go to answersbookstore.com to access all the things that are available on our web store. A great way to connect with people. I know my mom and grandma always get the calendar. That's one of their main gifts every year.
Yeah.
So great things to help reach out even to family and friends who might not know Christ, and share those truths with them.
We also have a magazine, Answers Magazine, and that makes it, you can get a gift subscription for that for Christmas. I know I like to do those kinds of things, so somebody has something coming all year. It's not just a one-time thing, it's all year long. So
there are even practical things like mugs and different tumblers and things. Great way to kind of walk around, conversation starters around the office, things like that, to help engage people with the truth of the gospel.
He says that keeps his coffee so hot, he about can't drink it. So I like that.
Yeah, I've been taking it out deer hunting with me, and it takes like an hour and a half before I can even drink it. It's so great products
Yeah.
that you can use to share the truth with people.
Awesome. All right. Well, looks like we got plenty of people here online, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first article is Georgetown students vote not to take action against pro-heterosexual marriage campus group, which even reading that title, it's you just kind of got to shake your head because Georgetown is obviously a Catholic university, and the Catholic Church opposes homosexual marriage, and so that's part of their doctrine. And so it's kind of interesting that the students are voting not to take action against a group that's promoting what the Catholic Church believes.
Yeah, so a couple of students had circulated this petition and brought it to the Student Activism Committee. Now, this is just a committee that makes recommendations to the officials of the school, but after several hearings, they decided not to take any action or to recommend any sanctions against this group. And one of the themes it seems like we keep coming up with here is the idea of tolerance. And some of the expressions in this article and the way this is all played out is that this group that promotes what we would think of as wholesome things, that marriage is between a man and a woman, it tries to fight against pornography use and those types of things on campus, they're not being tolerated.
Right.
And to say that they believe marriage has a specific biblical formulation is something that is not tolerated on the campus. So it's this odd back and forth of tolerance doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Right. Well, and one of the things that a common theme we keep saying is that, people say if you disagree with him, you hate them. I mean, that's the automatic equation, so to speak. But again, that's not what it means. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I hate you. It just means I disagree with you, and we should be able to talk about those things. But that's just usually not the case. And this probably made the news because Georgetown is considered the nation's most queer-friendly Catholic campus, which again doesn't make any sense because if it's a Catholic school, then they're not enforcing their doctrine, which is to say that that is wrong. And so, it's this we see this a lot even among Christian colleges, that they don't truly hold to what their doctrinal statement is, and so then you run into issues like this.
Yeah, it might be so in the filing cabinet, but it doesn't get practiced
in
everyday life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so next, fossil of our earliest ancestors found in Dorset, over in England. So supposedly this little shrew-like creature, which you can kind of see, I don't know he's kind of on the bottom of the screen, area off to your right-hand side. That's what the creature is. We've definitely found, they say, the earliest undisputed fossils of mammals that eventually led to humans. That's what you started out as.
Wait a minute. I dispute that. So that makes it's not undisputed.
You want to hunt that and eat it, huh?
No. So this fossil supposedly dates back 145 million years, and it connects to a lineage that they believe developed into the primate lineage, where you'd have animals like lemurs and what they would call more primitive animals, and then simians with monkeys and apes, and ultimately leading to humans. And all of this is based on some teeth.
Get ready for it.
Some teeth.
A few teeth.
And they say here that a couple of shrew-like things that are to date unequivocally our earliest ancestors based on the teeth that they found. And they throw out these interesting ideas in the article. The mammals were tiny, furry creatures that probably emerged under the cover of night. But they have
how can you tell that? From a few teeth?
From some teeth and some bones. We don't know those things. So they throw in these details that make it sound authoritative to try and confuse the issue. And this kind of goes with an article that was reported on earlier too that talked about how mammals probably evolved in the time of dinosaurs as nocturnal creatures, because then the dinosaurs wouldn't eat them and they wouldn't have to compete, and that's how they survived through the age of dinosaurs. But again, we can't tell something's habit, the way it lives its life, based on the fossils. Those are interpretations. We can look at some things like the teeth. Here we can see the wear pattern in the teeth.
Yeah, they talk about how it looked like they were the type of teeth teeth that could pierce, cut, and crush food. Well, that's an observational thing that you're seeing. That is something you could gather from looking at teeth. But what the organism looked like, whether they came out to eat at night versus the day, you can't tell that from just a few teeth. So they're kind of mixing what we would call two different types of science. Science that we can observe here in the present and science that we can't observe. Somebody even said on here, were you there? Things that have happened in the past that we can't be there.
Looks like there was somebody there. He says, I live in Dorset. So
yeah, I saw that. Somebody said that. Uh-huh.
Somebody from Dorset commenting right now.
Then someone said, so why then is it wrong to call someone a rodent? If we descended from the rodents, so
you
to
dirty
speak.
Rat.
And
That's
even the
not
fact,
an insult anymore, I guess, right?
Well, even the fact that they, this whole idea that, and actually that's based on another article that's talking about the mammals that living today were originally nocturnal with what you talked about because the dinosaurs were out during the day, so they needed to hunt at night. We're going to have an article up on our website actually addressing that particular scientific article. And again, the problems with that because you can't tell that information from just the fossils. Okay, so the next one is from Science News, hybrids reveal the barriers to successful mating between species. So hybrids are something, we have a few hybrids actually here at the Creation Museum out in the petting zoo. And hybrids are when organisms of two different species, typically, will mate with one another, or even genre, depends, will mate with one another and form offspring. And like in our petting zoo here, we have the Zorse and the Zonkey. And so they're combinations of a zebra and a horse, and a zebra and a donkey. And the reason that can happen is because all zebras, horses, donkeys, all belong to the family Equidae. And so they can mate with one another and produce offspring. And so this article is kind of talking about, kind of what causes speciation? How do we even measure or judge speciation, which is a huge topic in biology.
Because even identifying what a species is a very complex topic, and you can find different definitions and different ways that different types of scientists even would evaluate a species. And that might even be different if you're looking at something like bacteria compared to birds or mammals or something more complex. Even in the United States, we think of there's an eastern and a western striped skunk. They're virtually identical, but they don't really interbreed because they live in divided areas.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to, most of you would not be able to look at them and tell them apart. And so that idea of what a species is very complex in itself. And one thing they did bring out in this article is a recognition of the chromosome number and how that plays into how things can hybridize. And I know that's related to some of the discussion that you and I have had about do foxes belong in the dog kind? And because it's a very interesting case. And they brought that idea out here, trying to reconcile how all of these chromosomes can line up in reproduction and still produce fertile offspring. And
really, too, what they're really looking for is what actually causes speciation. Like, what is it at the genetic level? Not just the chromosome number, but the genes as well. What are these speciation genes? And they basically come to the conclusion that it's really hard to nail down what those are. And it is interesting because one of the things, I was in the Galapagos Islands a few years ago, just off the coast of Ecuador. And of course, that's famous. Darwin made that area famous, especially for studying the finches there, Darwin's finches. And one of the things that they know on the island is that sometimes finches that are different species will mate with one another and produce hybrids. And these hybrids tend to be more robust and stronger. And one of the things that the naturalists told us when we were there was that it's almost like the birds will sense that El Nino is coming, because those greatly affect the islands, and they will start mating in advance cross species to get these tougher hybrids, so to speak, that can survive better under adverse environmental conditions. So when I hear that, here's this person who's not a creationist, not a Christian saying that, I'm thinking, man, think about the design that had to go into that, right? So these animals could somehow sense this and do this. And some hybrids are more robust, some hybrids are not. It just depends on the organism itself. And so it's just a fascinating study trying to understand exactly how that happens, basically.
And somebody asked, is that going to help us understand the biblical kinds more. And yes, that's exactly what this does. So when we read in Genesis that God created especially the plants to produce after their kind, and then the same type of language is used with the animals, and we infer that that same sense is used there. So anything that can interbreed would naturally be of the same biblical kind. But that's hard to define because we don't have breeding studies for lots of different things, and we've done our best, and lots of our scientists here have researched that, and other outside scientists have helped us with that. Right. And identifying those is a big challenge. And with the Ark Encounter, one of the things you'll see there is an exhibit that identifies all of the different kinds that we think that's on at the end of deck one, and estimate about 1,400 different kinds present on the Ark to represent all of the land-dwelling, air-breathing animals.
Right, and it was a hard study. I was involved in that, and it is challenging because we don't know if certain things can or cannot mate. Just sometimes they're just not, like you're saying with the skunks, they're not in the same geographical region. And so then you have to look at other criteria, like how similar do they look anatomically, physiologically. And so it's a lot of work, but we've done our best to give a really close estimate as much as possible to what we think was on the Ark. So fascinating studies, and hopefully we'll continue to see studies like this because that helps us determine those kinds of things. All right. Blue Planet 2 viewers amazed as transgender fish dramatically changes from female to male, then fights the alpha for control.
This sounds like a bad reality TV show or something.
It does.
I don't know.
When I read that, I just thought, they got to try to put the transgender idea into everything, right? Including the animal kingdom. And what this is nothing new. They just happen to show it on TV maybe, but it's called sequential, and I won't pronounce it right.
Hermaphroditism, or protogynous hermaphroditism. Hermaphrodite is the word we use to describe something that can have both sex organs, like a worm. Earthworm has both male and female reproductive organs. So it's hermaphroditic.
Yeah, and so this happens a lot. We see it in fish, like this particular fish here. We see it in clownfish. We see it in gobies, eels. A lot of marine creatures seem to do this. For clownfish, like when the top female dies, one of the males will become a female and take over that because that's part of their hierarchy. With the wrasses, when the dominant male disappears, a female becomes male and takes over. But again, that's just, and a lot of times it's in response to environmental or some sort of energetic constraint, but it's perfectly normal.
And what it seems like they're trying to do is to take this behavior in the animal world, since we're just evolved animals, we're evolved at a different stage and a different type than other animals. They're taking that animal behavior to try to justify human behavior. And that's a very interesting idea to me, because if you look at the natural world and try to bring those examples into human interactions, you're going to run into some major problems. For example, many times when a male lion goes in and takes over a new territory and he kills the dominant male in that area, he will kill all of the cubs that were produced by that male and then reestablish his own genetic line. And I really doubt these people who are trying to promote homosexual behavior and transgender identity and that type of stuff in humans by looking to the animal world would use that as a justification for a man marrying a woman and killing all of his stepchildren. Yeah. So the inconsistency, when you don't have a standard like the Bible to look to, the inconsistency is just amazing. And we can only... it just makes me have compassion for these people who are looking to justify their lives and their behaviors outside of Christ. Rather than finding identity in Christ, they're trying to identify with the animals, with the creation rather than the Creator.
Yeah, I know even when I was in the Galapagos, there's a certain type of bird will produce 2 eggs and only one will make it, because basically what happens is once they both hatch, one of the siblings kills the other sibling. Do we really want that behavior, among our own children? We got to think about that. And again, people are just wanting to normalize, so to speak, what they're doing so much that they're willing to go to these extremes. All right, so we're getting lots of good Somebody said chimpanzees attack and kill each other, and they are almost human, right?
Sounds pretty human, actually.
Yeah,
It happens all the time.
that's the thing. Okay, what unusual teeth you had. Cute plant-eating dinosaur had huge choppers. Okay, so you can see a little picture of it there. It does look kind of cute, I guess. And so this just shows you can't judge what an animal eats by its teeth. And this had long, like 2.5 inches long, 2 inches wide, self-sharpening serrated scissors for teeth. But what did it eat?
Plants, and even the scientists who were studying it would agree with that. And their quote here is, its teeth have rigid surfaces, but are only covered with thick enamel layer on one side. So when they chew and they cross those teeth, the enamel side would be stronger and the other side weaker, and so it would create that edge. And then as they cut past one another, I would see a similar feature in rodents today, things like a beaver. That's the basic tooth structure. So as these teeth keep growing, they sharpen themselves and they'll cut these things. But many of the animals we find today, thinking about what something that has meat-eating teeth would look like, if I showed you the skull of a fruit bat, I'm pretty sure you would tell me this creature is a meat eater. But indeed, it uses those teeth to rip and shred and tear the flesh of mangoes, not some animal. So this is just a really cool design feature that we see in this animal.
Well, even panda bears, you see that. I mean, their teeth, I mean, if you look at the skull, it's like, whoa, that looks pretty vicious. And then you're like, it eats bamboo, it's a panda bear. And so that's what we need to remember, is that God originally designed and created everything to be herbivorous. I mean, they ate plants. But if you think about some of the plants even we have today, like coconuts, watermelon, it's not easy to get into those things, right? You're not going to try to get into it with a spoon, at least not the outer part. You're going to need a knife. You're going to need something sharper. And so God equipped animals to be able to do that. Now, after the fall, they started eating other things and using them in ways that, are not good, but that's just the result of the fall. So they can't judge an animal by its teeth. All right. Bible may record oldest known solar eclipse. So when I read that, I thought, oh no, what now? What now in the Bible supposedly is a solar eclipse? And so what they're referring to is the passage in Joshua, and when they are fighting, I believe it's the Amorites, and Joshua asks for the sun to basically stand still. And they are saying, these scientists are saying that, well, that was actually a solar eclipse that happened. And so this is just another example, because we see articles like this every so once in a while where they're trying to explain the supernatural in terms of the natural.
Yeah, and that's the definition of liberalism as we understand it in Christianity. This has a long history, even in the Protestant church, thinking back to German higher criticism and those periods where they tried to look at the Bible from a purely scientific perspective, trying to remove anything supernatural from it, because we've grown past those superstitious myths and we don't need anything other than science and our own reasoning to help us determine what's true. So this is just another a modern example of that liberalism, trying to explain away the supernatural with a scientific explanation. But how does this example of a solar eclipse stand up to what the text actually says?
Right. And one of the things, the reason that these scientists are saying that, well, maybe it was a solar eclipse, because they say, well, the Hebrew word that's used there for the sun standing still could also be translated silent or dumb. Now, how you know how a word to be translated is based on context, right? Would it make any sense for the sun to be silent or dumb? No. So that's probably not the proper translation. Standing still, okay, if God so ordained, the sun can stand still, right? He is God, he is supernatural, he has control over all those things, and so he can do it. So that's part of the problem there. And just the way that a solar eclipse, for example, the sun doesn't stand still. The sun continues it continues to rise in the east and set in the west. It's still moving. Or we're moving,
yeah,
but
we're
moving in relationship to it, but it looks like it's moving. Mm-hmm. So it's moving, the moon is still moving. I mean, and it doesn't last all day. And it's only for usually a few hours at the most, and you wouldn't even notice it until it was close to full.
Yeah, and they tried to explain that away in the article, even saying, oh, well, it was getting dark and then it got light. And so the people in the battle misunderstood that for a whole day had passed. And that's just nonsense trying to explain away a miracle. And when we look at God, the creator of the universe, he is not only omniscient and omnipresent, but he's omnipotent. He has all power. For him to be able to stop the earth from rotating so that the sun stands still. Some people say, oh, if the earth suddenly stopped, then the oceans would wash across the continent, and there are all these issues they bring about. If God can stop the earth itself, I think he can probably stop the water too. So that's not really an issue. And it ties into another story we see all the time popping up of NASA computers found Joshua's long day. Yeah, so this would go along with one of those arguments we say creationists shouldn't use.
Right.
And we've got a whole section on our website that deals with some of those things.
And even in the Christian News, they published an article on this, but I was glad to see that actually they gave comments by Dr. Jason Lisle, who's an astrophysicist, who is a biblical creationist, on the problems with interpreting this as a solar eclipse. Yeah. And so he goes into detail in this article about that. But he says, the text says, in Joshua, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. He says this is not what happens during a solar eclipse. I mean, we just had one, so there's no reason people in the U.S. couldn't see or couldn't know what happens during a solar eclipse. And the thing that got me the most was Joshua 10:14 says, there was no day like that before or after it. Okay, so that clearly indicates a unique event because there have been many solar eclipses since that time, so there's no reason to think that this is anything but supernatural.
Yeah, and we have the example of Hezekiah's sundial, somebody mentioned in the comments, and we don't want to take away from the power of God by trying to explain away all of these things.
Right, exactly. We need to let God be God. He can do those things, so... All right, this next one, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this article, but Luther's legacy, did a religious revolt create science? Okay, so first of all, there was science around before Luther. Well before that, that's not probably an appropriate title in that sense, but they're trying to look at how did the Reformation maybe have a role in spurring on science, basically, and a more modern sort of scientific age.
And the article doesn't come to any real solid conclusions, but some things that it does address, and this was featured in New Scientist, so a secular magazine.
Secular magazine.
They did bring out the idea that science makes sense from a Christian worldview because these men were looking to a God who created things with order, and they were trying to understand how God made things and how they work since he's made them, and talks about people like Copernicus and Tycho Brahe and others who were understanding how things operated, and I forget who coined the phrase, but thinking God's thoughts after him, trying to understand how nature operates. And without a Christian worldview, without a God who created things orderly, we have no justification for why things should operate in an orderly manner. If the universe simply came about from random chance processes, how did the laws of nature even begin to operate?
Well, and how do we know they're going to operate the same way today or that they will tomorrow? I mean, it's called the uniformity of nature. We know that we believe that the sun will rise and set tomorrow just like it did today.
But the naturalist only has that experience to fall back on.
Right. We have God's word that says day and night, all these things will not cease, until, of course, the Lord's return. But we know that from Scripture. They don't.
Really, if they're trying to apply logic, another thing that shouldn't exist in an atheistic or naturalistic worldview, that's a question-begging fallacy. Well, I know that tomorrow will be like today because yesterday was like the day before. But that doesn't mean tomorrow will be. Answering the question with its own answer, and it doesn't make any sense from a materialistic worldview.
Right. So we need to understand that. And science, people always say creationists are science deniers. And in fact, that kind of leads into the next article. I was just thinking that top U.S. creationists invitation as keynote speaker for Alberta Homeschooling Convention draws fire. So this is up in Canada. I had to laugh at this picture of Ken because that's like a really old picture of Ken. He's got way more gray hair now, just saying. So even when he saw this picture, he's like, whoa, okay, that was taken a while ago. But he's going to be speaking at the Alberta Home Education Association convention next year. And so Canadians, or some of them at least, are all up in arms about this because basically one of the individuals they interviewed said that Ken is a science denier. He denies evolution. He denies the age of the earth. Now, it's always interesting when somebody puts those two beside each other like that. Because I'm like, well, he's not a science denier because he hires scientists. He believes in science. He's got a degree in science education, so he's not a science denier. But the evolution and the age of the earth is a very different type of science. It's a science, it deals with the past, that's not observable, testable, or repeatable, and that really depends on your authority for knowing about the past, what you believe about it.
Yeah, it's really a type of special pleading. I'm going to make up my own definition of what science is and say you deny it. And of course, we don't deny science here as a ministry. Both of us have degrees. George has a PhD in a scientific field, and many of our staff have science backgrounds. We love science. I can't remember a time in my life I was blowing up things in the basement with my chemistry set all the time.
Right.
But it's just such a false view. It's misrepresenting the other side without really taking time to engage the arguments themselves, but throwing up these straw man attacks and different things. And one thing this gentleman says is that the provincial curriculum or a proper science education for their children is going to be denied if you let Ham speak and if you teach from the creationist perspective. Well, this is what we call the no true Scotsman fallacy. Oh, if you don't eat porridge with raisins in it, you're not a true Scotsman. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Right. And saying that you're not getting a proper science education if you don't teach evolution and the earth is millions of years old and we evolved from chimps or ape-like ancestors, that you're not a real scientist. And I mean, that reminds me
I've
what
gotten that claim against
Bill
me
Nye says
all
the time. And
Yeah.
You're not a real scientist.
Yeah. But I think my university would disagree, even though they might want to disown me. They did give me a PhD, and one of the things I was reading in here, it says that one of the Alberta liberal leaders said, people have freedom of religion, but it shouldn't interfere with their education. Now, we're seeing this a lot. People are defining what freedom of religion means. It's not, if you have to define it and it's only this, this, and this, it's not freedom anymore. And that's the problem. They don't want to insert they want to define what that means.
Yeah.
So.
Think we can get through one more here?
Right. Yeah, I think we can do one more.
Right.
Why not? This will be a short one. Oxford teacher faces action over misgendering pupil. So basically, there was a transgender girl. So she is a girl, but she's identifying as a boy, and she was in a group of students, and the teacher said, "Well done, girls," and he's in trouble because there was one girl that says she's a boy in the group.
And so, now this man who's a Christian and has presented himself as such, looks to the Bible as giving him the definition of what a man and a woman is. And he says here in this article that he's never tried to force his beliefs on anybody. He wants to love the children and engage them and teach them. And he makes this one slip, and now he's coming under this disciplinary action. Right. So if you think about, we talked about tolerance earlier. Here's another example of it. This man is not castigating this person for choosing to identify in a different way. He's trying to be respectful.
He's been respectful. He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
use the pronoun to refer to her. He just calls her by the name that she wants to be called by. So he's not going against his own beliefs by doing that.
And that's tolerance.
That's what he should do.
I disagree with
that's
you, but I'm going to live beside you and love you and engage with you. And what he's being met with is called tolerance by the culture because he's now intolerant. Right. And everything is just flipped on its head. Evil has become good and good has become evil. Right. And so more and more of these cases are popping up. And here, this one in the UK, we've seen similar things in
the
Canada and even coming to the US. all
So we need to
over
pray
Western
for these
culture.
people, and we need to just also stand up for our rights as Christians, and there are organizations that help individuals like this, and we need to continue to fight in the political realm and in the legal realm for our rights, so that
Yeah.
we're not, so that we
Pray
are
for
not
this young man
silenced.
that he would have opportunity to share the
Yeah.
gospel out of this, and there would be conversations that would come about where we can point to the truth.
Yeah. So several people have mentioned the Genesis 3D movie that just it's a basically it's 3D of creation, the creation week, with some interviews interspersed in it. I'm in it. There's several other scientists here at Answers in Genesis that are in it. And it is showing tonight in theaters, but only select theaters. So you can get on the Genesis, I think it's Genesis 3D.
GenesisMovie.com.
GenesisMovie.com website to find out where it's showing. This will be the last night it's showing in theaters. Someone asked about a DVD. There will be a DVD out at some point. We don't know exactly when, but I'm sure we'll be selling that when that comes out, and you can get that. Somebody said, Roger is awesome. Can he be a regular? So there we go. We'll see, okay? He's going to be a regular for a little while, but
Well, Ken's in
anyway.
Australia. You'll have me for a few more weeks anyway.
All right, well, that's all we have for today, so we'll sign off, and we'll see you back on Monday.